What's up, everyone? Wanted to talk about my lineup for Week 9 main slate on Yahoo Daily Fantasy. So, starting at quarterback, I decided to go with Derek Carr this week of the Oakland Raiders. He's a bit on the cheap side, so looking at these quarterbacks, got Russell Wilson at 38. Um, and then on the low end, you got guys like Derek Carr, Philip Rivers, Matt Moore at the $27 range. To me, I think he has pretty good upside in this game. He's been trending upwards in his performance, and he gets to face Detroit, who has turned into more of a pass-heavy team. So I expect this game to be pretty high scoring from both sides. And considering Derek Carr is quite a bit cheaper than Matt Stafford. I think you can get in on the goodness of that game without having to pay up for Stafford necessarily. Moving on to running backs, I decided to pay up at running back this week. So Dalvin Cook, he's been a stud on this Minnesota Vikings offense. That's really just centered around him. He gets a ton of workload both in the run game and in the pass game. He faces Kansas City, not a great run stopping team, so I expect Dalvin Cook to continue to play well. Christian McCaffrey, I decided not to go with him this week, mostly because of his matchup against Tennessee. I think it's going to be a pretty tough uh, defensive matchup there, and also I think Carolina is going to be motivated to play good defense after getting blown out last week. So I expect this Tennessee Carolina game to be pretty low scoring overall. So trying to avoid McCaffrey this week. But instead, I went with Aaron Jones, who has really come into his own as of late, being used as in the passing game quite a bit. So he faces the Chargers, which is a pretty soft defense so far. So I expect to continue to see good things from him. And finally, at running back in the flex position, I decided to go with Jaylen Samuels. I expect him to be very heavily owned this week, just based on how cheap he is, and he's expected to be the Steelers' starting running back with both Benny Snell and James Conner not expected to play. So at $12, you know, I I'm fully on board with paying that amount to get his production. So moving on to wide receivers, this is where I decided, um, there's some bargain plays this week. I decided to go with Danny Amendola and Marvin Jones from the Lions. As I mentioned earlier, I think the Lions Raiders game should be pretty high scoring with a lot of passing, and we've seen Danny Amendola get about I think like 8 to 10 targets in the past 2 weeks. So he's a target machine, and if he starts, you know, converting some of those into a touchdown or two, the upside is there. Marvin Jones, similarly, he had a 30-40 point game just 2 weeks ago against the Vikings. So, Oakland, they have one of the worst pass defenses in the league. Um, could definitely see a good game from him. And then I went with DK Metcalf, who has been scoring touchdowns at an absurd rate lately. Um, the Seahawks obviously really like this guy. He's their rookie wide receiver. So they really have been making an effort to develop him, and he's been, you know, turning out production especially against soft defenses. So he caught 2 touchdowns against the Falcons last week. He faces Tampa Bay this week at home. So I could see him continuing his touchdown streak. And just another thing in general is I feel like wide receiver is the position that has, I guess, the most amount of variance week to week in terms of who's going to get the workload. So that's why I decided to go with cheaper guys like Danny Amendola and Marvin Jones over, for example, Kenny Galladay, who I believe, yeah, is quite a bit more expensive at $25. So it's really about just finding the right balance whilst still staying under the cap. So I think between these three wide receivers, it's a pretty good chance that they can catch a couple of touchdowns between them, hopefully. Moving on to tight end, I decided to go with Hunter Henry this week. So I expect the Green Bay Chargers game to be relatively high scoring with two decent quarterbacks. Green Bay in particular has been pretty weak against tight ends. So I think just 2 weeks ago, Darren Waller of the Raiders put up 120 yards, 2 touchdown game against them. So Hunter Henry, I can definitely see him, being a big focal point in the Chargers game plan this week against Green Bay. And then finally at defense, I got to go with New England. They've just been in a league of their own this year, pretty much doubling the next highest scoring defense. I know they get Baltimore this week, Lamar Jackson and their explosive offense, but I trust Belichick will find a scheme to minimize that threat and try to make Lamar pass down the field a bit more. And yeah, the Patriots defense has just been very solid, especially Belichick is pretty good at scheming against younger quarterbacks. So I'm not going to shy away from them this week. And that pretty much does it. So between every one, they cost $199 with $1 remaining. Yeah, so that'll do it for this video. And good luck to all of you guys out there also playing daily fantasy.